Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this event actually for this honor and privilege to speak today. The title of today's panel implies that the speaker is supposed to discuss whether the new methods in launching and conducting war emerged recently. In my short remarks, I will seek to define what the best ways to respond in such situations are. Currently, it is widely recognized that the most serious security threat in the northeastern area of the alliance is the emergence of an aggressive Russia. During the last decade, Russia seriously improved her military capabilities. It could be insisted that the Russian military transformed into an adaptive and learning organization with more funds and more attention to effectiveness through training, organizational change, new equipment, adaptability, emphasis on speed, and strategic operational deployment. The Russian military acquired totally different attributes that it used to have a decade ago. An excellent example of this is the deployment of the forces prior to the invasion into Ukraine and a series of exercises conducted during 2014 and at the beginning of 2015. The Russian military proved that they are able to covertly and within a very short period of time move significant forces and change the existing balance in the region and directly threaten neighbors. What is more alarming is that the current Russian regime possesses the will to employ these better military capabilities to satisfy their aggressive ambitions to annex part of, invade, or threaten sovereign nations. A testimony to this is the invasion into Georgia in 2008, invasion annexation of Crimea, ongoing intervention into eastern Ukraine, and clearly threatening exercises and military activities close to the borders of the nations around the Baltic Sea. There are some characteristics that are common to these operations. It should be stated upfront that none of them have been conducted according to the one and only pattern. Russia is both skillful and inclined to conduct information operations and employ propaganda as kind of non-lethal shaping operations as a precursor to an actual invasion. In most cases, the aim of information operations is to establish favorable conditions by weakening target nations' will to resist and by legitimizing aggressive intent. This aspect was obviously demonstrated during recent conflicts, but it was also utilized prior to and during the Soviet-Finnish Winter War in November 1939 and March 1940. It could be insisted that another feature is strategic surprise, achieved by a combination of deception, covert deployment of forces, swiftness, and speed of operations. Invasion, occupation, and subsequent annexation of Crimea, as well as further Russian military operations in eastern Ukraine in support of so-called separatists were unexpected. Similar effect was also achieved with the Soviet invasion into Poland in September 1939. One more feature of the operations is opportunistic employment of all available instruments and means and exploitation of any favorable situation. We witnessed and continue witnessing employment of combination of military forces, proxies, economic means, information warfare, cyber attacks, diplomatic pressure in order to achieve overall operational objectives. One could recently witness a wide range of overt and covert military, paramilitary, and civilian measures employed in a highly integrated design that created an effect of hybrid warfare. The most alarming aspect of these operations is that some of the activities can be conducted or situations can be escalated and exploited by an external power below the threshold when the formal conditions to invoke NATO Article 5 are present. Could we discern any newer aspects and methods in recent Russian military operations than we never saw before? Most of them are not new. We saw in a number of cases when they were utilized before. Still, there is a new aspect. A coordinated and synchronized way of employing instruments of national power and conducting operations that produces synergy and unexpected effects. It is due to the advanced planning and coordination, totalitarian nature of the current Russian regime, and the fact that the Russian military is an adaptive and learning organization. The most adequate response in the developing confrontation between the alliance and Russia could be to define and develop the relevant means and ways to see and recognize, deploy, and act. Let me mention that in response to the developing situation, Lithuania, together with the other nations in the region and allies, took some steps to address it. Lithuania significantly increased defense budget. Defense expenditures were increased by more than 19% in 2014 and almost by 30% in 2015, and are planned to be increased by 35% in 2016. The increased defense expenditures allow launching a number of serious acquisition projects and increased numbers of personnel. Only this year, the Lithuanian land forces will increase personnel strength by 3,000 soldiers. It opens better opportunities to focus on relevant training, including conducting larger and more realistic exercises. All this allows significant boost of Lithuanian military capabilities. Larger exercises with allied participation in combination with the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian annual exercise Baltic Host allows us to check and exercise procedures and infrastructure to provide host nation support and receive allied forces. We sincerely appreciate the presence of allied rotational units as a measure of assurance and as a true demonstration of the spirit of alliance. Their presence allows great opportunities to train together as well as send clear messages to all audiences. A number of units in Lithuania today comprise a national very high readiness force, which is tasked to swiftly and adequately respond if need be. The Lithuanian Parliament passed legislation expanding military's roles and authority in conducting operations short of declaring state of war or national emergency in order to properly, timely, and adequately respond to any potential situation. The Lithuanian law has been recently changed in order to counter hostile propaganda by clearly defining it and outlining means and ways of how to neutralize it. Generally, we are on the right track with all the measures taken to ensure credible deterrence and eliminate even slightest doubt that we are not serious about the situation in our region. But we cannot stop at what we have already achieved. Further improvement of means and ways to see and recognize, deploy, and act must be continued. It is an imperative to continue with adequate defense budgets in order to allow further development of capabilities and conducting adequate training. Ensuring that there is an effective intelligence system in place could be considered as a pressing requirement. It could be insisted that there is a very urgent need to develop a common approach how to counter Russian propaganda. That our nations and alliance are being subjected regularly. Similar approach to the Russian propaganda should be used as it is employed against ISIS propaganda, as both of them are as damaging and have the same objectives. Boosting NRF capabilities by establishing and developing VJTF should be considered as an extremely positive development. The adequate decision-making process should be in place to alert and timely deploy VJTF. Logistic support issues of VJTF must be addressed with an option to preposition supplies in the potential area of operations. Training and exercises with significant allied participation must be continued with a focus to refine existing plans, develop flexibility, reach new levels of interoperability in conducting conventional operations, and become more and better familiar with the region. All the means and ways must be focused to produce a synergistic effect and increased capabilities for the individual nations and the alliance to see and recognize, deploy, and act. With this, I conclude my short remarks. Thank you very much for your attention.
John, thank you.